Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Red Path on this very special tournament recap. I am joined by the wonderful Brian from the Red Path, who returns triumphant from the CTC, a 64 person tournament in Canada, just happened last weekend. And Brian, not only did he go to this event with the world leaders, but he managed to win the event, which marks the first official GT or major sized win for the Red Path, which is a great milestone for the channel. So massive congratulations to Brian. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you're pretty hype about this. I'm certainly very, very hyped for Brian, as Brian's first GT win as well. So a lot of firsts on the video today, which is awesome. Really, really cool to have Brian to chat with us today about the games, about how the event went, the list that he ran, all the good stuff. If you've watched any of our tournament reports before, it's going to be fairly similar, but we're probably going to spend a little bit more time kind of talking about the games and going into a bit more detail just because, it's the actual Red Path rather than a guest coming on. And yeah, I'm just super stoked and I want to talk about these games as well. So, Brian, without further ado, what's up, man? Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm doing real good. Thanks, Dara. I'm still a little exhausted. I woke up at 8 a.m. this morning, but I think I pulled into the home driveway at about 3 a.m. It was an 8-hour drive all the way back from Ottawa. Here we are. Had to get ready for work and get back to normal life, but had a great weekend up in Ottawa. Fantastic city. Were great. Everyone was nice. I'm really excited to be back from the event.
Yeah, awesome. And you were playing on stream as well for the finals. So we'll pop a link to the final game from YouTube here in the video description if anyone wants to watch it. I highly recommend if you do want to kind of see world leaders played at the very highest level on a top table to decide who wins an event. Watch that stream. Brian shows off a lot of amazing tech against the Bully Boys, one of our toughest matchups right now. And yeah, how Brian pulls the win out of that game was really, really interesting to watch. I watched it just this morning. I actually learned a lot. Some people would say that no one can teach me, but I learned a lot from Brian's game, and it was really awesome to see. But yeah, what an amazing weekend. How did you feel like going into this event? Like, I know we were talking a lot in the build up. You were maybe a little bit stressed about the Bully Boy matchup, but you were gunning for the golden ticket in our conversation. But like, how are you feeling kind of going into all this?
Yeah, so when I originally registered for the event, it was in the previous, not meta, but it was pre-data slate. I definitely felt confident pre-data slate, pre-orcs. We didn't see any. When I registered, I didn't see anything about the orc codex. Um, I figured like if everybody's gonna be on Canoptic Court, and that's probably what I was expecting to see, I was actually feeling pretty good because I feel like how I play and my style, I could table a Necron player turn 3, call it a day, and we're good. But then the orc codex came out and Bully Boys and Green Tide and all of that started to scare me and get under my skin, and I was freaking out. And I actually had a practice RTT right before this weekend, where I actually got slaughtered by a Bully Boy player. Like it was done turn 2, and I had no idea what just happened to me, and that scared me
That was
so
the
bad.
the most I've ever seen you down bad. I was like talking to you
That's
afterwards. I was like, "Whoa, Brian's in the gutter right now."
that was my worst loss probably in a year. Um, and I took it personally. I was like, okay, I still got to win this event. I know Bully Boys is going to be here. It is like the army to beat. All the meta chasers are going to be on it. There's a lot of WTC players here. It's going to be here. So, sat down with my bud, who's a really good orc pilot, and I grinded the Bully Boys matchup like 5 times in a row, and actually ended up starting to see some results, figuring out some strategies, the actual play pattern. You have to play really different into Bully Boys than you do most traditional armies, because most melee armies you can kind of just jam them in the middle and say, "Oh, I have fights first." That doesn't work into this army. If you watch that stream, you'll see that a fights first Mo kills with 10 Berserkers, kills 1.5 Meganobs. That doesn't do anything. Um, so yeah, I was really freaked out, but I definitely wanted to win, and I tried to get all of my ducks in a row, figure out my game plan for how to deal with orcs and how to deal with guard. I knew indirect Canada loves their indirect. There's a lot of Death Guard up there. There's a lot of Imperial Guard up there. So a lot of that went to kind of like my decision for my list, and I was feeling shaky but confident I could perform at least 4-1 at this event, which was my goal.
Yeah, yeah. I think like in the immediate build up to the event, I was noticing you were kind of a little bit more positive going into a bit more confident, as you said. But you had a pretty cool list. One of your favorite pet units made an appearance, which I maybe didn't necessarily agree with the inclusion of in the list. But why don't we talk about the list construction and what you brought to this event?
Okay, yeah. So it's actually a pretty standard world leader list for those of you familiar with like the format of it. It's going to seem pretty familiar. We have, of course, the 4 character package of Angron, Invocatus, Khorne, and Glaive, Master of Executions. Um, I did make the conscious. I was actually really thinking about running Hornemo instead with Battlelust, but I don't think into a bully and Imperial Guard meta, which is what I was expecting. Damage 3 was definitely a little bit more prevalent, and being able to heroically intervene doesn't really do anything if you're heroically intervening in a Mega Ops, just with low damage. So that's my one observation. But I knew going into Canada that this is the kind of meta I was going to expect, so I chose Glaive. We then have 1x10 Berserkers, 1x5 Berserkers, 2x10 Jackals, 2 Rhinos, Chaos Spawn, squad of Chaos Spawn, squad of 6 Exalted 8-pound, squad of 3 regular 8-pound, and a Mauler Fiend. The Mauler Fiend,
It
I
becomes
was,
interesting at the end with the fiend, right?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
this definitely the twist.
Mm.
The Mauler Fiend, I was definitely stuck with. It's this is my first event actually ever playing WTC terrain and terrain rules. Traditionally, people say that big melee monsters struggle on WTC because it's a lot more dense. Lanes, there's like lanes that you can go down. There's no 2-inch terrain, so you can't go over anything. I didn't really feel any of that problem while I was playing with the Mauler Fiend. But it did influence my decision. I was actually stuck between the Mauler Fiend and a Predator Destructor. I knew that the Predator is probably the worst of the two, but once you factor in mobility, it actually may have had argument over a Mauler Fiend, but I ended up going with my gut and just sticking with the Mauler Fiend.
Awesome. So yeah, it's a bit of a kind of classic list with your own personal spin on it, and I think the addition of the fiend does open up some interesting options for you. You know, it's like an extra tool in the box where you can kind of turn on like tank shock, which I suppose is pretty useful into maybe some of those tougher matchups. Like just putting out, we'll say it works out what on average about 6 mortal wounds, right?
Five
Um,
and a half, so it's like,
five and a
yeah,
half, right?
you
Yeah.
got
So like I know it's not amazing, but just being able to like push that into something like Bully Boys or Green Tide, like I know Bully Boys will maybe shrug half of them if it's the WOG turn, but like it is a nice thing to have as an option, I guess. And it's a bit sticky as well. Like it's not
yeah.
necessarily the easiest model to remove either, right?
And I saw it. It is the distraction Carnifex of our lists. I
Mm.
like the one of Mauler Fiend. Again, I was thinking about Orks and Guard. Guard indirect, it's kind of just immune to it. Like they can tickle it and maybe hurt it a little bit, but they're not going to kill it with their indirect unless they go real hard into it, which means if they're going real hard into the Mauler Fiend, the rest of your army's doing fine. Same thing with Orcs. Boys will not kill it. And Meganobs is going to have to be like their only answer into it. And that's if they're throwing their Meganobs at my Mauler Fiend, then I'm happy.
That's really
And
okay, right? Yeah. Then
even
it's living its best distraction kind of affects life there.
Yep, and even best case scenario, you pay your 2 CP, -1 damage the Mauler Fiend, and it has a very high chance of living through Meganobs. They do not have the attack volume to go straight through it. It has happened for me multiple times now. Actually happened in the stream. And then he has the damage ceiling to actually try to pick off a couple
Maybe
Meganobs,
one, maybe two, who knows?
maybe 2. A tank shock, grab
Yeah.
another one. Like, he's there for chip damage.
Yeah.
And chip damage into Meganobs means they're not fighting on death, or if they are fighting on death, I was using him as uh, like a drifting rhino too, using that tactic. I was like, you have to fight on death into my Mauler Fiend. I have invulns, better feel no pains. He was just a damage sponge for me. And I was using tank shock a little bit in the event, not too much, but he really was just like the world's best distraction card effects for me.
Yeah.
Because players just kept overcommitting into it, and I was like, go for it.
Nice. I suppose upon reflection after the event, like, do you do you really rate this list in terms of like, would you say this is like one of the more competitive iterations of World Leader list that you've run? You know, is it something that you're kind of like, this is probably as far as I can push this archetype, or do you think there's like room for moving things around and maybe changing it up a little bit? Because I know some people are like
Um,
kind of happy to play at 1950 points, but it's 1990. Am I
this
correct
is
in saying
this is 2000 on the dot.
2000 on the nose, right? But do you think there's like after the games that you've played, and obviously winning the tournament is amazing and all that, but did you kind of ever find yourself being like, this element isn't really working right now?
Um, the list felt fine. Um, I really love, ever since I started playing a Chaos Spawn, I have never not had one in my list. I actually love that inclusion more than the Mauler Fiend into the list because it allows you to set up tempo plays a bit better. Um, Jackals and Spawn serve two very different roles. They're the same price point, but they're two very different models. Spawn can punch up, they're faster, they're incredibly durable, and you can use them to just throw in the middle of the board or on an objective to just score points. Jackals are your screening units now. In this meta, you world leaders have to be screening if you want any chance to beat orcs. Um, so I was really happy with the inclusion because of the typical like 1950 or the more traditional lists aren't running spawn. I would really start pushing people to be running spawn. You need that tempo to be able to play the point game and not just get boxed in. Like you want your opponent trading down into you as a world leader player, which is really good. That's a really good place to be for us. Um,
I guess on that note,
if
maybe for people watching who aren't necessarily at the stage where they can maybe recognize everything, can you kind of like explain what you mean in terms of like the spawn and as a tempo piece, like for people who may not really be aware of how that kind of operates?
yeah, so if you're a world leader player and you go first, usually we have a really good chance just to set up a lot of traps. And one of those traps that we have best is taking a rhino with Mo or Khorne, sticking it next to an objective in a ruin, and then saying, hey, if you touch this objective, you're going to get Khorne. Like he's going to come get you. So then you take that spawn and you throw it on the middle objective right next to the rhino, and you say, I'm now holding this objective. I am now putting pressure on you to stop me from scoring points. You can't just shoot this threat because I'm just going to sticky it for 1 CP. You have to come charge it. And the thing about spawn is they take 8 damage on average to kill once they have a 4-up feel no pain. That's a lot. And you can spike it. They have a 4-up save if they're in cover, if you set it up right. Like they have to typically overcommit way more than 65 points to kill your 65 point unit. So when I say tempo, you're initiating the game. You're starting, that is the first time you're saying this game is on my terms. I now have a point lead. You have to come do something about it. And once that trading starts, your opponent now has to overcommit to kill your spawn. Now you can commit what you think is reasonable to pick up whatever they have. World leaders are incredibly lethal. So typically we can undercommit and kill with some smaller units first, like your Invocatus, regular 8-bound 3-man, Khorne and a 5-man. And then they have to do the same thing again. They'll trade back into the middle. Khorne will fight on death. You'll fights first. Now suddenly you're trading up, and now you got this endless cycle where you're always just coming out on top, throwing an Angron Resurrection in there, and easy game.
Yeah, and it's all initiated by having the spawn in that position. And I
Correct.
guess maybe the other thing, which I don't know, maybe you kind of agree with it as well, is like what I really like about them is they are the unit that can go out and kill those 5 infiltrators who
Yep.
are hanging out in front of you. Whereas jackals, sure they can, but it's a lot less reliable. The spawn you can, it's not like a sure thing, but you can put them into 5 marine bodies and reasonably expect them to kill most, if not all, the squad, right?
Yeah, they typically kill a scout squad, but they are very swingy. Like they're
Mm,
not like if you draw area denial, I found, and they have 5 scouts in the middle, spawn
dicey.
going into that's dicey. You
Yeah.
may want to commit something juicier like Invocatus to that. But if you get first turn, fantastic piece. Like you give your opponent such a headache.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So, oh, and just remind me again, what the 8 band layout in this? You have a 6 X band brick, and then what else was there? There was
One 3-man,
one 3 man
regular man.
and one 6 man, and that's it, right?
That's it. Only 9 8-bound.
Oof, that's probably the bit that I don't like about the list in terms of like it cuts it pretty close in terms of obviously I like it in your hands because I know you will not squander the exalted 8 band, but I think maybe for someone who's um like we'll say if this was like a meta list hypothetically, right, and someone picks it up, I feel like a misplay with those two very valuable assets could really cost them a lot, right?
Yep, and I can get into like a game experience with that too. Like there was a point turn one where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna auto lose if all 6 of these die. Um, they're the most important linchpin of the army. Them and Angron. They're the only things we have that will just touch a bully boy squad and pick it up. Um, my Exalted 8-bound were the MVP of the event. I played into Space Wolves, fantastic into Space Wolves, fantastic into Bully Boys, fantastic into Guard. Um, Death Guard even they're really good into. So yeah, when we get into that, it is a little bit riskier. I do typically like running two regular 8-bound. If I had 5 more points, the Mauler Fiend would actually be a regular 8-bound instead. But here we are, this great new meta. World leaders are in a very awkward spot with list building, so we kind of got to work with what we got, and that makes it cool because every list is going to be a little bit
A little bit different. Yeah.
different, but they will play wildly different.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like it's quite interesting. Maybe someone who doesn't have such a deep understanding of the faction and surface value is like, oh, it's just a normal world leaders list, blah blah blah, nothing to see here. Oh, they put in a Mauler Fiend at the end, cute, okay. But that's not it, right? Like there's such depth to those changes and how they actually change up the dynamic of the play pattern and stuff. But maybe let's move on now and start dissecting those games. And I guess before we do, you were just telling me before we started recording, like you ran the gauntlet at this event, right? Like for anyone who's going to come in and be like, oh, it was an easy run or blah blah blah. Not the case here. As you played, what was it? All five of your opponents were like top 20, and four of them were top. Was it top five, top 10?
I just basically played the Team Canada WTC team. I actually got to rematch one of them from WCW last year, which is really
Nice.
cool. Nick Higelio, who when I get to, you're gonna love his list when I talk about it.
Cool.
It is entirely your jam. Um, I fought Team Canada's captain. I fought one of their other members, who's I think their highest ranked player, and then another Team Canada member, and then Nick, who I fought, is then affiliated with them. So, and then the fifth player is the best Space Wolves player in the world, or one of them. Like
Sure.
it was not, it was pretty.
Yeah.
I was begging for a break. Most of those guys went 4-1, and I was their only loss, if that says anything.
Yeah. Tough run, tough run. But yeah, what did it start off with? What was your game one?
So game one, I had my fingers crossed, and I was like, anything but guard and death guard, I will take it. I'll even take bully round one. I get paired into death guard. Indirect guard, Team Canada. Here we go. Indirect death guard. Sorry, yeah, death guard. And I was like, uh-oh, because this is triple PBC. This is Plague Marine spam, 27 Plague Marines, Predators, which are really good in that list. Dawn turned me onto that with Predator Destructors, AP3 Heavy Bolters with lethal sustained is a hell of a drug.
It's certainly
Um,
something, yeah. Like you don't realize it until you actually play it for the first time. And you're like, what do you mean AP3? And what do you mean
one
all those
Predator
things happen on sixes?
through Feel No Pain, one Predator, this is with against Dawn, one Predator picked up all 10 Berserkers in the Mo squad. And I was like, I don't even get to Blood Surge. Like I set up a Blood
Yeah,
Surge play and I was just so disappointed.
yeah,
I was so sad.
yeah.
But his list was two Predators, triple Plague Burst Crawler, Plague Marine Spam, all of that love. Kind of typical from Death Guard. You'll either see that or a War Dog variant or a Mortarion variant. I do think probably the Plague Burst Crawler spam with Plague Marines is probably the best way to play the list. He didn't have any Nurglings, which was nice, so he wasn't scout blocking. Um, so turn one, he gets first turn. I made sure I hid my entire board from him. He pushes up into the middle of the board. I believe we were playing Take and Hold, so we were playing a just pretty. Oh no, it was Purge the Foe. It was Purge the Foe. His which is really rough into any of the indirect armies because they will just start the purge tempo timer going where every turn those three Plague Burst Crawlers were picking off either the spawn, both of my jackals. I was losing one squad per turn, which I'm kind of fine with them going after that and not the 8-bound because he wanted the guaranteed kills. So it's kind of like a blessing and a curse. He was guaranteed getting his kills every turn, but my more expensive models are being left alone because he wanted guaranteed kills. He kind of pushed up into me with his screens. He didn't really watch his 4 inches very well, which is when you're screening, make sure you're standing 4 inches back from the front of your base. That will prevent your opponent from being able to pile in with a second model if they double charge, which is exactly what happened. He put a bunch of cultists into me, like up into my face in the middle of the board. Angron actually charged the cultists, picked all of them up. Mo also charged the cultists with 10 boys, broke through, touched a bunch of fights first Plague Marines, killed all the Plague Marines that had fights first anyways, and then I proceeded to wrap around with the pile-in an entire Rhino, which had 10 more Plague Marines in it, so they couldn't get out.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man.
With
That's that's a play.
with Exalted 8-bound nearby just to make sure that Rhino isn't going anywhere. Um, as soon as that happened, we were both just like, well,
That's probably it. Yeah.
and then he pulled his Predators out, which they were Destructors, but they had las cannons. Angron took 1 damage from all of the Predators and Plague Burst Crawlers. Angron's healthy. His Plague
GG.
Marines are stuck in a Rhino. He had 20 or 10 more Plague Marines on the opposite side of the board. I said, you can have that objective. I'm not going over there. I think Karn's Rhino was there and that was it. And Karn just started advancing in his Rhino, driving away as fast as possible. I was like, I'm not dealing with this.
Let's go.
Bye.
Nice. Nice.
I did end up coming back to try to deal with the Plague Marines just to get Assassinate or something. But yeah, block. If your transport is fully surrounded, your opponent cannot get out, which is, fun fact, really good into armies that rely on infantry and specifically Plague Marines, which hit like a truck.
Yeah. I think the play that you show off there, the multi-charge and then pile into the fight first squad to make sure that they can fight first. It's a really cool play when it goes your way. You obviously have to be able to read the board state to see that it can happen, but it's a really good way of getting the win in that. Otherwise, I would say quite a difficult matchup. The deck guards, they can be quite troublesome for us, I would say. Yeah, really cool, man. Really good one.
And
so, yeah.
he did eventually end up getting out of that Rhino that he was trapped in. I think he fell back with it, and Mo went to go deal with something else. Mauler Fiend was just standing on an objective, being a distraction Carnifex. He charged the Mauler Fiend, and he ended within 6 inches of Mo's squad once he completed the charge.
Oh.
I did the poor man's Lusty Mo and paid 2 CP, charged right in, picked the whole squad up. We called the game. So
yeah.
That was just
you gained the bones of 30 Plague Marines for free.
pretty much for free. Did not have to deal with fights first really at all that game. Khorne did, but that's fine. I think I threw the 2 spawn to go touch all 4 heavy plague weapons, and then Khorne went and touched the opposite side of the squad. Again, getting around fights first wasn't really relevant. Game was over pretty quick. He was tabled top of 3. Final score was like 20-0.
Yeah.
And this is WTC scoring, so
yeah.
Max points is 20.
Awesome. Strong opener. Then what do we have rolling into game number 2?
Game number 2, I'm playing against Dan Bruce, who is on Space Wolves, Stormland Space Wolves.
Oh yes, I remember we talked about this one before the game. Yeah.
Yeah. He is a fantastic pilot. He did double Lancer with Murder Fang and then 24 Thunderwolf Cavalry, and he had Herald in there. World leaders are pretty good into that list at having access to -1 damage. Basically makes your Exalted 8-bound can live through a Thunderwolf Cavalry charge actually pretty fine if they have Feel No Pain -1 damage up. Because Thunderwolf Cav are only strength 5. So they are wounding on, or they're 5 and 6s, and I think in there. If they give themselves Lance, I think they go up to wounding on 4s. So Exalted 8-bound can tank that pretty hard. Angron just eats Thunderwolf Cavalry for breakfast. Mo has a field day because Space Wolves can't build a list without 10 characters. He had a lot of really good plays because that matchup's actually really tricky if you're not used to dealing with reactive movements, because the Space Wolf reactive movement is flat 6. They just get to run away from you. So turn 1 play I went for was actually setting Angron up 9.1 inches away from the Thunderwolf Cavalry. Same thing with the Mauler Fiend being 9.1 inches away from the Cavalry. Angron threw a +1 to charge, and I went for 8-inch charges. And actually ended up making both. I mean, the backup plan was I had -1 damage on deck. So if he charged Angron, I was confident Angron would live. He'd be injured, and I'd still get what I wanted, but Angron would get hurt. So it wasn't that big of a deal. 8-inch charge with a reroll is like a 60% chance to pull it off. And I mean, I was trying it 3 times. So it's like 90% chance the Mauler Fiend or Angron makes it in, which both just did naturally. Picking up an entire Thunderwolf Cav squad. Khorne picked up a Lancer turn 1. He pushed his Lancers up to try to pop my Rhinos. He got pretty unlucky. Lancer's missing twice and only rerolling one die. Sucks, but
It's a very Lancer thing to do, though, isn't it?
I don't really care. Like, I don't have any sympathy for when Lancers fail to
Yeah.
pop off because I've had Angron get one shot by Lancers. It doesn't feel good. Um, it was a back and forth melee game. Just trying to dodge that 6-inch reactive move while also trying to not just get blown up by like Murderfang. Murderfang popped off in that game. Almost picked up most squad entirely by himself just by doing like a weird cheeky double charge. But that was a good game. I ended up taking that one 16-4. That one was, I believe, prior. No, that wasn't priority targets. That was taken hold.
Nice. Yeah. It can be an interesting one. I feel like the Space Wolves game is much easier if you have, as you say, the experience into them, or just kind of like the understanding of, well, a lot of this is cavalry, so I can kind of screen, especially on WTC. With those
And
lanes, you can just be like, cool, you
and
can come down this lane and only do this.
that's a good point. I'll mention that too because it's I actually am not. This is my first time playing WTC. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't.
Yeah.
It makes for very toxic, like art list building, right? Because you can't bring certain list archetypes, and certain archetypes are actually just kind of like encouraged. Mass infantry does really well. Mass indirect does really well. Anything in between does not. And there's a lot of armies that fall in between. His Thunderwolf cavalry was coming down one of those lanes, and both of my rhinos plugged the hole. He charged it, blew up the rhino. I plugged the hole with the second one. He charged it, blew up the rhino. I plugged the hole again with Invocatus.
Oh,
Three
that's all
turns
they
in a
can do.
row.
Yeah.
3 turns in a row. I just said half of his army can't leave that half of the board, and he gets his 5 point objective, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which
Is not an
WTC,
amazing play experience, right? But is a
no.
byproduct of WTC, I would say.
Correct. And WTC encourages that kind of play. But I mean, that's the consequence of bringing one of those lists, but you really don't want to feel punished by terrain when you're bringing lists.
Yeah,
So I
I think
definitely,
GW terrain goes a long way in not punishing you for specific lists, and I think the UKTC actually is kind of the same. Where sure there are lanes, but like there's a lot of open space, you know, in terms of like almost like lanes and courtyards. Whereas WTC feels like it's just like intersecting lanes, you know, a lot of the time.
yeah, and you can definitely get railroaded really hard on WTC because like even if you draw like a mission, say he really needs to get area denial, so it forces him to go for like a 10-inch charge to go the opposite way around to go for whatever squad I have in the middle versus the rhino that's right in front of him. Like it versus in GW, you could run right past it probably.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
it's
that
an
was my
interesting
experience.
one.
I definitely leveraged WTC to my advantage in that matchup to keep mounted in place.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So another win for game two, shocker. And now going on into game three, what do we got next?
Oh God. Um, I get paired into Nick Cagelio, who is a fantastic player. He was the Necron player from when I played at WCW last year. At WCW, I just completely ran him over. He conceded turn two. This was index Necrons back when they did no damage. Satan weren't really that good. They were just relying on like if you left one warrior alive, they would multiply back into like 20 warriors if you closed your eyes. Um, so he didn't want to play the new style of Necron, so instead he played guard. And I was like, oh no, indirect. I look at his board and he only has 2 Medusa carriers or carriage batteries, which are strong. That wasn't the weird part. The weird part is
I remember you talking about this list. I'm high on
30
this. Yeah, let's
he had
go.
30 Atalan bikers
The
and
Rough Riders, right?
Rough Riders. Yeah,
Not
sorry.
bikers.
No, so okay, I misspoke here because Nick is a fantastic hobbyist. He painted his army. It wasn't Traitor Guard. It was just rebels
Oh, so
on a
cool.
planet. So
So cool.
he said his army was fighting for free healthcare and education for the Ogryn because they're stupid and they need education. But it was
Incredible.
he was using chaos bits here and there, but he was using the jackals from
Oh, from
Gene
GSC.
Stealer GSC
Nice.
as the cav.
So cool.
They all had like goggles and Mad Max style helmets. All the Ogryn were like Trader Ogryn, like you want to do. It was really, really cool. He charged me turn one with Imperial Guard, and I was floored. I was like, what is happening? And he looks at me and he's like, I was like, at the start, I'm looking at this list and I was like, what does your army do? Like, you're supposed to shoot me. And he's like, Oh, ignore my army rules. I have data sheets and 2 CP bring cavalry back. And those Melta
Cool.
lances, they hurt
Yeah, the
because you
ones
can get,
on the bikes, right? Or well, horses, but bikes in this case. Yeah.
and you never see the order, but guard can give out a +1 weapon skill order. So he's making those things hit on twos. They're strength 9 lance,
Yep.
and they're like dirt cheap, and they lay eggs and they come back. Um, this was search and destroy.
Oh, even
Uh,
better.
yeah, I
Nice.
lost first turn. His o he had 12 Ogren. They all pushed up into the middle of the board, and these bikers were coming around my flanks, and he put another squad of bikers behind the Ogren in the middle, so that like I have to commit to blow up Ogren, right? Because Ogren are awful. Like you have to overcommit to kill them.
Yeah.
But if I overget to kill them, I get right of the Rohirrim right back in my face by Melta Lances. Um, which is what happens. Um, we did have kind of like a little kerfuffle happen. Medusa, he was shooting his Medusas and he forgot that they could battle shock. He was shooting them all around the board. Exactly what I said happens. He puts the Ogre in the middle. I overcommit to kill them. I think I throw a Mow in its entirety at it. Angron flies over the Ogre to go like pick off a tank, and I was hoping Angron would just be a distraction card effects. There's actually a good chance he lives the Melta Lances. Hitting on twos, that's 8 that go through. Lance, 4, save 2. Like, there's a good chance Angron lives there. I was fine with committing him up there because, like, if I high roll that, I just win the game on the spot if Angron lives a full turn because Angron will sweep and pick up 10 bikes. Um, Spoiler alert, Angron, like, died a horrible death because he can't take 20 lances. He can take 10 lances. But we pick up actually most squad with rerolls and sustained and wound rerolls from the 8-bound. Pick up pretty much the whole squad of Ogren. I pick up another 3-man with the Exalted 8-bound, and Invocatus went around the flank to go bully and chase down 10 bikers. He's really good into bikers. Um, I did a really cool play with Jackals where I charged the bikers, but I did 10th edition cheeky movement where they moved closer, like 0.1 closer, and then like vertically up. Technically ended closer to the model, but I couldn't base them. So I actually got to pile into a bunch of things with the Jackals. Invocatus picked up all the bikers. There were no bikers left to kill the Jackals, and Jackals were like touching 4 different things. Pinning things in place. Angron blew up a tank. We're feeling good. Mo blew up all the Ogren. He was no longer attached to the Ogren. So the tragic thing was he forgot that his Medusa characters do Battle Shock. We go to his turn. He does his entire turn shooting. He starts doing his charges, and then finally he does his one of his last charges, recharges his bikers into Angron. He ends within 6 inches of Mo, and Mo heroically intervenes and picks up the whole squad of bikers. And we're like, he was pretty upset, right? Because he's fights first, heroic intervention. Like Angron's now alive. Game's pretty much over. He forgot to tell me about his battle shocks. Um, he was actually hitting Mo with the 2 battle shocks. So that was kind of, we felt pretty bad about that. I ended up, because I know Nick, he's a good guy, he's a good friend. I didn't want to win that way, even if the rule wasn't apparent. Like I didn't want to do that. I actually let him take it back. I said on a 4-up man, I will roll my battle shocks, and we can see what happens. Mo failed his battle shock, so we rewinded like 6 different things, then replayed it. I ended up giving it to him back. Angron just dies outright, and he gets his Jackal squad back, or his biker squad back, which was, I feel like,
I mean, that's a really good thing to do, though. But I get what you mean. That like it is just it like it swings the entire game, right? With that heroic intervention.
right, like
Um,
10-man biker's gone, Angron's healthy,
yeah,
versus Angron's
and he's
dead,
going
and
straight
bikers are there.
in the next turn, right? You know, it's
And I was like,
yeah.
I looked at him and I was like, I'm a little frustrated, but I'm not mad at you, right? This is just like,
Mm.
I didn't even know the battle shock was there, but we rewinded it. It ended up being fine. Still did really well. Managed to hold off on all the points. Every time I killed one of the biker squads, they came back. They were always like, kill rapid ingress, kill rapid ingress. And he had 15 CP throughout the game because Lord Leontis is in the back giving
He's just
CP.
chilling, yeah.
Medusas are like pounding me. It was a good game. I ended up winning that game 16-4 though, just because I locked him off the primary. He was too focused trying to deal with my threats. that was where a game where Fight's first Mo actually shined into guard, which was really bizarre to say.
Not what you expect, right? Yeah.
Not what I expect. There were three different occasions also where I rolled double six and had four icon rerolls, then didn't bring Angron back, looking for a six with four icon rerolls. And it was like three times in a row, and it was pretty brutal.
He was busy
Uh,
off on the sideboard dealing with the other like 1,000 bikers that are trying to get into the battlefield, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a
And
tough one.
it was a fun game. I like Nick. He's a fun guy. He's a great hobbyist. He's really funny. Um, that was a fantastic, very hard game, very hard
Yeah.
fought win because all of those points came right at the end. Because I was not building up a point differential until the very end when I just scored 15 points and he scored zero, and that just like swing on WTC swings you through up three and him down three.
Yeah, yeah,
So that
it's really
was
big. Yeah, yeah. Awesome. So day one ends. You're 3-0. And how are you feeling at the end of day one? You're still going confident, or are you a little bit shaken by that like very strange Imperial Guard game in the last one?
yeah. I was very shaken by it. I'll even admit like we were both a little flustered too because there's like a heat lamp over our head too the whole time, so we were both
Hmm.
incredibly sweaty and like unnecessarily like the top of my head was like on fire. Um, and after that, like kerfuffle in the middle and undoing everything, we were both pretty frustrated. Weren't mad at each other, but we were misplaying a little bit and getting a little flustered. So at the end, like my heart rate was definitely going. I was excited to be going into day two, with a undefeated. I was like, I want this ticket. We went out to go get a bite to eat. We relaxed and had fun at the hotel room. I was just trying to do my best to relax and calm my heart rate down, which did not happen.
It did
I
not,
think
because I
Dara,
remember I woke up at 8 a.m. my time on Sunday, and I was like just messaging you. We were talking about because you paired CK, right? In Chaos Knights.
or Imperial Knights.
Imperial Knight, sorry. And I was just chatting away to you over my morning coffee, and then I was like, wait a minute, I don't normally talk to Brian on my morning coffee. I was like, wait, if it's 8 a.m. for me, what time is it for you? And you're like 4 a.m. I was like, what the hell?
I couldn't sleep.
Yeah,
I was studying that WTC layout because it was gonna be rough. I was fighting Imperial Knights on Hammer Anvil,
yeah, yeah.
and the WTC layout was not very friendly to Hammer Anvil. They're
That is the
firing
one where
lanes the
there
whole way down.
probably is the most amount of like open space in terms of like, oh, I can literally just like have these two massive avenues that I can just shoot down the entire length of board from deployment zone to deployment zone, right?
And once you factor in towering, him just being able to tag something,
Yep,
there's nowhere to hide. It
yep.
was I'm pretty comfortable into Imperial Knights on that board. I was less comfortable, and this player too is one of the higher ranked Canadian players in the country too. Um, Also a fantastic sportsman. That's like a recurring thing that happens. All five of my opponents absolutely fit the Canadian stereotype of being excessively nice. So I was really happy for that. And something really cool happened in this game that I kind of want to talk about. For
Yeah,
any of
why
you that,
don't you launch into it? Yeah, this is gonna be good.
yeah, so turn one was pretty tragic.
I guess for context, right? His list was Canis and like, was it
10,
10 dogs?
10, 10 it was, yeah, six Warglaves and four Holverns.
Yeah.
Um,
Which, when you originally said the list to me, you were like four knights with battle cannons, and I was like, how can you fit five big knights and then still have six warglaves in a list? Then you were like, wait,
yeah.
it's the auto cannons. Like, okay, that changes things.
So
Because I was
in
stressed
the
for you when I thought it was like they were playing with like 4,000 points.
Oh yeah, yeah, no. But Canis is a
Oh.
beast. I did start the game by putting Angron in reserves. On Hammer and Anvil, I was like, okay. And specifically with his list, only Canis can really deal with Angron. The rest of them can if they're close and in Melta range, but like I can have agency over that. So I was saying like I'm not charging him turn one on Hammer Anvil. He won't let me, right? So I was like, I'm just gonna throw Angron in reserves, pay the CP, throw him where I want, and try to hunt Canis down. And that was one of the few times where rolling for attacker defender really mattered because he sometimes puts Canis in reserves, or some Knights players will. So I won the die roll, so I made him tell me first, and then I got to pick if I wanted Angron in reserves, which is one of the few times that actually, I think, only time that's ever mattered for me. Um, Also, that's the first time I've ever put Angron in reserves ever. Um, Ended up working
How did it
fine.
feel?
It felt okay. I don't
Yeah,
like not having. It's like there's a piece of me missing when he's not on the board turn one,
I get
and it feels like your opponent just is like a weight's taken off their shoulders, right?
you. Mm.
Because now they don't have to worry about the 22-inch moving T-Rex. Um, so first thing that happened is I scouted forward with my Exalted 8-bound, and we both were talking back and forth, and by intent, we measured it out. We thought the 8-bound were completely hidden. The Exalted were completely hidden. And on his turn, he actually found a way to shoot them from a very weird angle with Canis. It was very hard for me to see because it was like a vertical angle down, and it was hammer anvil from his side of the board. So I can't like look down and check up. He literally was able to see like the top millimeter of the horns on the backpacks. And if Canis shoots into them, they're all gone. They're just all dead. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, I'm gonna let you move him back if you want to move him back." Even though like because like that's why it's important to talk about intent. And he even mentioned he's like, "Hey, if we didn't talk about intent beforehand, or you thought they were completely safe, and I thought they were completely safe too, then I wouldn't give it back to you. But because we did talk about it, he actually let me move my Exalted 8-pound back, which is a very he did not have to do that. He could have absolutely just taken the game on the spot, and we probably would have been done there. Like losing the 6 Exalted 8-pound that early at that length of the board. That's really my only answer to deal with Canis, that and Angron. That was really nice of him to do. So props to him.
Yeah, it's a really good thing
Um,
to do. Yeah.
I move back. My turn one's pretty boring. This one's priority targets, which is fine because I was planning on just stalling and waiting for him to touch objectives and me to just blow knights up all day, right? But with powering, with how fast his knights were, that wasn't really the case. He actually put the pressure on me to run at him. Turn one, I actually managed to advance and charge, get 8-bound all the way up the board, regular 8-bound, which will kill a knight, a little knight on average with +1 to wound. That was the plan. I was going, because of how the lanes worked, I was going to lock him in his deployment zone with the 8-bound on that one flank. It's a 6-inch charge. I had a CP, failed the charge, CP reroll, failed the charge. He was not locked in his deployment zone. My 8-bound were out in the open. They just got picked up, and now he walked right past the 8-bound, and I planned my entire turn for trying to make that 6-inch charge to, at a minimum, lock him there. So now that he wasn't locked there, he walked past the 8-bound and could see my entire army with like 5 armatures. Shredded me. Maulerfing got popped. 8-bound are dead. Invocatus is dead. I think the spawn are dead at this point, and it's looking really bad. We go to my turn. I ingress Angron back in. Angron gets a charge off. Khorne charges an Armiger, doesn't kill it with +1 to wound with 5 Berserkers, which is really sad. Mo charges an Armiger, pops it, fortunately. So I've taken 3.5 Armigers from him because Angron gets 1, and his entire army's intact, staring at my entire army. It wasn't the best, but
It's a really rough spot to be in, man.
the Exalted 8-bound were hidden. Mo was pretty well hidden, and he took everything other than he blew up Angron. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about that in a second because something really important happens with that. He blew up Angron with 4 Armigers. The Exalted 8-bound are fine. He takes everything else from me other than Khorne by himself. And Mo's squad is relatively healthy. Mo gets charged by an Armiger, and Mo's stuck in combat with this Armiger for 3 turns. This is a 10-man squad of Berserkers and Mo. He did Vect +1 to wound, so I was struggling to get the +1 to wound off, but I figured like I only need to roll 4 6s on Dev to just pick this thing up. Just wasn't doing it. It was really sad. We end up calling the game very shortly. Angron does resurrect on turn 5. This is a loss for me. Angron resurrects on turn 5, makes it actually pretty close. The game was going to be like a 12-8, and I'm done. I've lost. I'm really sad. I lost game 1, day 2, and I go back to the bar, and I'm going to go grab a beer just to cool off for my next game. I can still win a golden ticket. That's what I'm telling myself. And then he actually comes up to me, and he says, "Hey, man, I messed up, and I want to make it right." Angron got eviscerated by the Wolverines because he popped and he made them AP2 with the strat, and they all had anti-fly and rerolls and all that, but it turns out some of his armatures actually weren't within his deployment zone, and he was shooting me with anti-fly 2 up when he should have been wounding on 5s. And specifically, one of those armatures did like 12 to 15 damage to Angron just because I rolled only 3s for my saves, which was really sad. Angron died, and I was like, that was like the game over for me at that point. But he realized he messed up. He made a mistake. He came back and he's like, "I'm gonna re-roll all of my shots." Angron ended up living, and he said, "Yep, Now Angron would have been able to tag 3 knights, probably pop 2, get another. Canis is now dead, and he said it probably would have reversed, and we actually ended up giving the game back to me. So great sportsmanship from him. He absolutely didn't have to do
That is
that.
seriously good sportsmanship.
Like, I was floored. I bought him a beer. Um, the game, and we made sure it was right. Like, the game would have been mine. It wasn't just a what if.
Yeah.
We made sure the scores actually lined up. Um, and it was just a matter of him personally coming. I would have never have known, and I'm pretty sure the game was on Tabletop Live Patreon. I don't know how many people watched that. Um, you guys should. That's a great place to go if you want to see some more games. I actually have 2 games on there. If you want to see the guard game, it's cursed as hell. Um, we weren't really doing the secondaries well at all. We were getting
Yeah.
stuff wrong because we were all flustered from what was going on. But this game, like, if you want to, you won't see that. You'll see me lose, but like if you see me lose, I actually ended up winning, even though that's not explained. So if you see him mess up, don't worry about that. We fixed it up after the fact. Most players I know at that high of a level would not come back and tell me. He came back and got me and made it right, and I respect him a lot for that. His name's Eric McCrew. He's Team Canada. Thank you, Eric. That was awesome.
Yeah, shout out to that guy. I mean, that's just really, really, really admirable. It's what you want to see in high level 40k. You want to see that shit like all the time, you know? Obviously, you don't want to see the mistakes all the time, but as a measure of rectifying them. And I know if it was me, like I was actually in a similar situation in the LGT last year where I was running a Thousand Suns player really close to the wire. And, I won the game by like 3 points. And this was like very early 10th edition, so I wasn't like super familiar with like literally everything. And I'd actually used the redraw stratagem twice, which I didn't know at the time was limited to one. So
Mm.
I thankfully realized this because Jack said it to me because he was spectating my game. And a similar thing kind of ran back, and I was like, yo, we need to redo the last turn. Like, we put everything back on the table, just ran through it all again, and we ended up tying the game. And I think it's like probably a similar thing where I was just like, I can't take this win. It's not a win, in my mind.
And,
And I'm pretty
and
sure
he
he was feeling the same, right? Because it's just like, it's not a
and
real win in that sense.
and between that and the Exalted Ape Pound, like he went out of his way to make sure the game was played right, and
Yeah.
it was played respectfully, and it was a well played game. So huge shout out to him. Um, that is peak 40K. Like that is what your goal should be as a sportsmanship level. Um, I went and beat the drum real
Awesome.
hard to try to get him to win best sportsman, but
Yeah. Yeah. That's
so that
really, really good story, I think, to be honest.
that then unlocks me to go upstairs and go play in the stream room to play against Chris Haynes, the
Yeah.
final
The weird,
boss.
like, little attic room. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to like go up the stairs with my models, and like there was a whole like the whole team Canada was in the hall, like sitting there, and they're all looking at me like, "Good luck, that's our captain up there." And it felt like I was like in a Pokemon gym, you're like going up to like the final stairs up to the leader, right? That's what
Yeah.
it felt
Yeah.
like. I was like, "Oh, here we
Yeah.
go."
Yeah.
So and it was gonna be Bully Boys, so I got served up right in front of Blues, which is on stream, as we mentioned earlier. You guys can watch that game. Um, game
Not
like I will.
can, should. Like, you should watch that game. It's very, very good.
I tried my best to play that as clean as possible. Which I actually do think it's probably my cleanest stream game in terms of getting rules right, measurements right. Just warning, like this is game 5. If I made any mistakes, I know there were a couple things on his end. Don't hold it personally. He was a great player. He's a very well respected player. Um, Even like the exchanges back and forth can sound sassy or like irritated. Really, that's just when you have 2 high-level players at a top table, game 5, they just want things to be right. And usually it's never taken personally. And we ended up getting beers afterwards anyways, like usually happens. Fantastic game, fantastic player. Um, I can talk a little bit about my mentality about how to beat bully now. It's a psychological game. To look at a orc player, especially a really good orc player. You have to psych them out to be able to win that matchup, which is easier. It is easier, like it's easier than you think it would be. That would involve using jackals as a screen, using advance and charge defensively, not offensively. Turn 1, I pick advance and charge and sustained, and I look at him and I say, "Are you going to call Wah?" And he has to call Wah because I will charge him and I will blow his stuff up. I will line Mo up across his entire board and lock him in his deployment zone if he doesn't do it. He did call Wah, so I was like, okay, here's a jackal screen, and I'm just going to stand back. And being able to do that kind of like psychological damage with advance and charge and not actually use it. Like I wasn't really using advance and charge until turn 4, really, even though I think I had it up almost every turn, just to threaten it. Jackal's screening, -1 damage. There was a cool play where I used a heroic intervention to just run back with Invocatus. I like feigned an easy charge for him because he could have charged Invocatus and then piled into the Rhino. He charged in the wrong order. His jetpack guys went over my Rhino. I ended up being able to heroically intervene back, give him a harder charge, save Invocatus, and pick up one of his trading pieces really early turn 1. He still made the 9-inch charge with the Rhino, popped the Rhino, no problem. But Invocatus got to live, and I got an extra piece out of that. And then I really tried my absolute hardest that game not to touch any Mega Knobs till turn 3. Because he has to wall turn 2, because right now we are like face to face. My screen's against his screens. If that all falls apart, like his Mega Knobs are getting touched, so he has to call wall. We go into our later turns. Angron, Exalted 8-Bound are just picking up Mega Knobs now, no problem, because they don't have Feel No Pain. I'm able to dart down the board. Mega Knobs are too slow without advance and charge to get back to his home objective to get me off of it, so I got to sit on it for 2 turns. So really just taking advantage of how slow Orks are turns 3, 4, and 5, and how really vulnerable Mega Knobs are turns 3, 4, and 5 is exactly what you want to be doing. Ironically, World Leaders need to be playing for the late game, not the early game in that matchup.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what I learned by watching that video. It's all well and good to hear you say it, but seeing it play out, in practice at that level and understanding how it was effectively a weird kind of like psyops thing, all right, where it's like, you have the situation in the beginning where you're like, I've got advance and charge. You have to respect that. If you don't respect that, you're going to be punished, which means they have to call the walk, which means that all you have to do is make sure the first 2 wogs, they're all they're getting. It's like a jackal squad, maybe a couple of other things, and then you can go in with your good stuff.
Yep.
And I think it works really well. I mean, it played out kind of how I imagine you wanted it to play out, really.
Yeah, I felt like I kind of had like the tempo the whole time again. Mo is really good for setting up tempo into that army. Mo's goal should not be to touch Mega Knobs. Don't fool yourself. He's not really that good at picking up Mega Knobs. The dude's got 7 wounds, the boss, and a 4-up Feel No Pain. You're
He
not
ain't dying.
killing him
Yeah.
with Mo. And if you do, you spiked well, they spiked down. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a comfortable spot to be. Mo's goal should be to pick up those 20 boy screens and build a fights first wall that is a bait. You want the Mega Knobs touching that. You want them stuck anywhere but your Exalted 8-Bound and Angron. Mauler
Yeah.
Fiend was the exact same situation. He was just like, hey, here's this annoying sticky thing that only Mega Knobs can kill. Come get it. Mauler Fiend ended up actually tragically blowing up,
Dying in a desperate breakout.
but then proceeded to do like 15 mortal wounds to everything around it, which
Yeah,
killed
it
2
was
Mega Knobs, and
wild.
I was like, profit. I
Yeah,
was like, I'm fine with
it
this.
was like, okay, dies in desperate breakout, but like takes out a substantial amount of orc units on the way. I'm like, is this the best possible scenario?
I was like, this is better than falling back. I wish I could
Yeah.
like, because he was dead to rights. But yeah, that game I had to pull every play in the book out to really to beat that matchup. And I do think that matchup is an incredibly challenging one. Just like for Necrons and Custodes, I think Orcs are a very forgiving army to play. And I think for a World Leader player, it's the classic, you mess up once, you lose.
Yeah,
Like
for
the
sure.
wrong play happens, you lose 500 points. Angron just randomly dies. Like Angron's the most important model in that matchup too, between him and the Exalted. This is also one of those matchups where you want Spawn, because Spawn, again, set up that tempo. They force them to overcommit with, like, their only options to kill Spawn are 20 boys or a Mega Knob squad. And you punish that back. So,
Yeah. Yeah, they spawned in a funny time in that game. I think they got killed by like Gazkul's shooting or something in the end. It was just like, really?
no, it didn't matter. The Spawn just
Yeah.
ran up, did tempting targets, killed a few boys, and then hid in the corner.
Yeah, it was good.
And
It
for
was good
engage on
vibe.
all fronts later,
Yeah.
too. Like, it was, again, like, having that extra piece was nice.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, you come out, you win the game, you win the tournament. How did it feel? Were you like high as a kite?
Yes, this was my third GT where I got so close to the sun and I could feel it. First time was the Michigan GT where I got my last golden ticket. I actually lost on stream. That was a whole year ago. I was a different player back then. I think that was like my first GT ever too. Um, and then we went to Glass City and Toledo, where I lost my last game 84 to 82 or 82 to 84, and that would have been a GT win. So coming here, it was vindication, but oh my, it was probably the hardest GT I've played so far.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, these players were on top of it. Bad matchups for me. It was bad matchup, bad matchup, bad matchup, just nonstop. I'll even call the guard one a bad matchup, even though I don't know what that is. I don't know. I don't really know
That's
what's
what
going
makes it
on
a
over there.
bad matchup, though. You don't know
Nick
what's
figured
going
it
on.
out.
Yeah.
It's just it was crazy.
Hmm.
So and I was just kind of like I didn't know how to feel. Like I was like super tired, super happy. There were so many emotions going. I'm
Yeah.
really happy that I got to take it home and get my first GT win, and I'm going back to Atlanta this year. I already
Hell
asked
yeah.
for the time
Yeah.
off, so
We just got to get me there now as well, so we can finally meet up and have a good tournament together. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Um, so the next question obviously is like going forward. What are you going to do now between now and Atlanta?
I'm currently working on getting a new World Leader army painted up. My old one was kind of rush painted. I was a lot more novice, and I've really started to explore the hobbying side of the game a bit more. So I'm really excited. Dara's actually working on an Angron for me. I'm really excited for that. That'll be cool. Um, the rest of the army is all Beastman themed. I'm really taking my time, making sure it looks beautiful. So when Atlanta rolls around, it'll absolutely be hopefully one of the more showcasey armies, if possible.
Yeah,
Probably not going to be anywhere near Golden Demon, but it's at least going to look good. And that's what I feel like I owe my world leaders at this point.
yeah,
But I'm going to be working on my hobbying. I'm going to be retiring my world leaders just for a little bit for RTTs and local meta. I really want to get into my Night Lords.
let's go,
I'm going to start.
baby.
I'm
Dread
jamming
Talon
Dread
time.
Talons at my
Yeah,
RTTs. There's a few GTs coming up. I probably won't have anything other than World Leaders painted. So I still will be playing World Leaders, just not. I was doing it every other week. It may be more like once a month. Um, but I'm gonna be trying to get some Dread Talon content going now.
amazing. Yeah, something fresh for the channel. And obviously, yeah, like there, because you still have a bunch of tournaments lined up, right? Like in terms of like GT plus sized events.
Yeah, we got the Michigan GT. Jamie's inviting me out to the GT in Ohio. So Jamie and I will have another get together, meet up again. That's not till later in the year, fall. And then of course Atlanta's coming up, and I'm sure another GT will sneak its way in there somewhere.
Definitely, yeah. It's really awesome, man. I'm super, super stoked for you. And I'm sure everyone watching this is as well, especially long-time fans of the Red Path. Before we close this one out, if you have enjoyed the video, drop it a like. If you want to congratulate Brian, drop a comment down below saying how hype you are because I'm so hype. Hop into our Discord. It's the link to it is down below. We're all in there. We're all hanging out. You can chat with Brian as well. If you want more like kind of focus kind of attention and feedback in terms of competitive stuff, you can hop into our Patreon. It will give you access to a specific channel within the Discord, be it hobby or competitive. And, you can get a little bit more of a tailored experience for myself, Brian, and the other guys if that interests you. And it also supports the channel, which allows us to go to these events and win golden tickets. At least in Brian's case. In my case, I will get to go to the events and have a good time. But yeah, so I have some stuff coming up as well. I've got the Bristol Super Major in the next couple of weeks, so expect a tournament report where I go 0 and 5 coming out of that one, which will be a nice one to kind of balance this out. But we'll wait and see for that. And yeah, Brian, anything else you want to say before we close this one out?
Uh, Bully Boys bleeds, guys. That's all I could say.
They bleed green.
They bleed green. We can get them.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much, everyone. You know how to do it. Like, comment, subscribe, all the usual good stuff. And until the next one, I've been Dara. This has been Brian. You've been watching The Red Pass. So stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.